I would like to start off by acknowledging that the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation are the traditional custodians of country that the NADA office is on and that I am on today, and that we are all on country of Aboriginal people. And I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, including any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today or watching this in the future. So the topic of today's webinar is consumer participation in action, and what that means and what that looks like in practice will vary from service to service depending on the needs of the people we work with. In the non-government drug and alcohol space, consumer participation, including peer work, is still quite new and very much underutilised, especially considering the many benefits it brings. NADA has a strong partnership with both Hepatitis New South Wales and NUAA, who have great experience in this area. And so today we have come together to share some thoughts and experiences on the topic, and there will be time for questions, I think, like Sam said, at the end. And with that, I would like to introduce you all to our panelists. So we have Andy Heslop from NUAA, JD Doidge from Hepatitis New South Wales, and Kyle Leadbeatter from Hepatitis New South Wales as well. And I'll get straight into kicking off with the questions. So first question, and there's a couple of questions in there, but you know, quite together, I think. So what is your role and what does that role look like in your organisation, and also how does your organisation support that role? Kyle, we might kick off with you, please.
Sure. So my name's Kyle Leadbeatter. I'm the Community Support Coordinator at Hepatitis New South Wales. So I've been at Hepatitis New South Wales for about 7 years, championing peer work and the inclusion of peers in all sort of work that is done in the Hep C space. Particularly the sort of clinical space where we work. We've got a peer partnership program. I've got a cat's tail in my face. She knows Yay. I'm on a webinar, so she pops up. Otherwise, she sits there nicely every other time. But yeah, basically, it's a peer partnership program that we run at Hepatitis New South Wales, where yeah, we've seen, I think, 7,000 people or so come through and as engagement through the program. Plenty more testing, treatment, all that sort of stuff, and a team of, I think at the moment we're about 25 peer workers across New South Wales. So yeah, really from the far north of the state, south, east and west, which is great, really nice spread and always recruiting. And yeah, that's the role that I play, and obviously do that alongside my fine colleague JD, and also get the enjoyment of working alongside Andy for certain little projects that come along, which is great.
Yay.
Great, thank you so much, Kyle. And 25 peers across the state, is it 25, did you say? That's amazing, it's absolutely brilliant. JD, would you like to introduce yourself and add in anything else?
Sure thing, I would love to. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone, my name is JD, and I work part-time in a supportive role to Kyle's with Kyle. So we're in the community support team, and I'm a project officer there, and specifically around peer work. I'm pretty lucky that I come from an interesting connection to Hepatitis New South Wales and my work here, predominantly with peer workers and in that space. I come from a lived experience background myself, and over 10 years ago, I went through the good old-fashioned interferon days. Woohoo! And I think that most people in this space would know that I'm being dreadfully sarcastic at the moment. And that's part of the reason that I'm so excited nowadays to be working on the other side of things. Really passionate about spreading the word of DAAs, the direct-acting antivirals, because it's such a game changer to quite an arduous journey that we had to have back on the interferon days, which was quite a different time commitment and quite a side effect filled experience. But through luckily clearing my Hep C at that time ago, I got involved with Hepatitis New South Wales and have been working in volunteer roles, but started working doing lots of different programs over the years, casually on and off, speaker roles, kind of like consumer feedback situations, and have ended up doing And now I work part-time in the office with Kyle on particularly the peer partnership program, which I said I am very passionate about. And luckily I do get to kind of like have a foot in both camps, that I can still work in the community and with my peer colleagues, but also I get to be on this side of things too, which is kind of like behind the scenes and helping organize the program, as Kyle has kind of outlined a little bit. And it's good work, and you get to work with incredible people. So I'm a pretty lucky duck. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much, JD. Thank you for coming along. And I love to hear the experiences of people who went through the interferon process. Because I had doctors try to tell me to do that, and other people say, no, there's new stuff coming out, and I waited for the new stuff. And I was really glad I waited.
Yeah, so you did the warehousing, I think they were calling it at the time, which doesn't feel like a very nice thing to be done to you as a person, but I bet you're glad.
Have we just lost JD?
No, just lost JD.
Okay, that's all right. We'll jump over to you, Andy. So
yeah, sorry, Liz.
I was just going. Did you want me to repeat the question, or you know what you're doing?
I've got it here in front of me. Thank you so much. Everyone's very switched on here and got the questions in front of me. Hi everyone. My name's Andy. I am the peer outreach lead at NUAA. That's my role, and I've sort of stepped my way through NUAA over the past 5 years, from being a prevention officer, sort of working very much on the ground. So, I think everybody at NUAA sort of does work on the ground, sort of grassroots sort of stuff, and working with consumers. But moving through the organisation through to the leadership role that I'm in now, in management, and I'm incredibly thankful for that opportunity, because if you'd have told me, back in my Telstra days or in my previous life as a musician, that I would be that my living experience of drug use, a current injector, as well as my bloodborne virus experience with HIV and Hep C, would be valued as expertise would be. I would have sort of gone, what? And so I'm really thankful for that. And within the organisation, we similar to what Kyle said, we have a number of peers situated across the state, from the far west in Broken Hill through to the metro areas in the Pan. Our NSP, part of our core business is the fixed site NSP at Crown Street. It's peer-led and peer-run, and we have a roster of volunteers for that. And then, of course, I mustn't forget to mention also, we have DanceWise. We have something like, I think, 260 volunteers in that space as well, doing the festival harm reduction as well. And I believe they're recruiting more at the moment. So, ramping up post-COVID. Supporting our organisation, it's intrinsic to the work that we do. It's like support's a really important part of the overall landscape at NUAA, and we provide really great support to our peer workers, obviously, and we do that in a variety of ways, through debriefing, supervision, through access to counselling, EAP, group meetings, and all that sort of stuff. But then, we all receive really great supervision. We as managers here at NUAA, we provide supervision to our to the peer workers and direct reporting under us, and then we also receive group supervision. We have a community of practice as well, which we instigated a few years ago, which was around obviously the development of the learning manual, sort of the book of NUAA. Understanding how those COP community of practices work. It's been really valuable to draw the experience from a diverse set of backgrounds, because we're peers often wear different hats. We might be seen as a peer worker, but we have a peer who is HIV, peer who is Hep C, a peer who has gone through interferon treatment, like JD just said, and then also peers who have gone through the DAAs. And we rely on that experience to flow through the organisation, and then flow out into the projects and work that we do across the state.
Thank you so much, Andy. I think for me, it really highlights the community and different skill sets there is across the lived experience community. It's not just, well, you've done this one thing and it's all about that. It's okay, you might have experience with this, but you've also got these skills and experiences in so many different areas. And yeah, seeing that with the work that NUAA does, seeing that in action, it's a really beautiful thing, I think. So question 2, why is it important to have a designated, identified or peer worker role in an organisation? And I know in both Hepatitis New South Wales and NUAA, there are lots of those roles for NADA member services. I think most of the services don't have those roles. So thinking, why is it important to have a designated, identified role in your organisation, and perhaps why it might be helpful in other organisations that don't have them? We'll kick off with you again, Kyle, if that's okay.
Thanks. So I think for me, it's about ensuring that voice of the people that are accessing and using services is carried right the way through. I do think it's important that peer worker roles aren't tacked on. And I think it's interesting, sort of the wording on that question around sort of peer worker role. And I think one of the things that's really important for me is that it's just not a single solitary person who has lived experience, or is a peer worker tacked onto an organisation and they have that one single voice. Andy made the point perfectly before about those variety of peer voices. And I think it's really important that you get as much of that in as possible. Lots of organisations, KRC, for instance, has a community reference group. And that group is really important because there's lots of different people coming from lots of different backgrounds with lots of different perspectives. There is no peer worker voice. There is no peer voice. It's not singular. So I think it's important to try and get as much in as possible. And yeah, I think that it's, yeah, if you can get more people in that role, it's great. And the other side of that, I think that's really important to me is that person's role isn't isolated, isn't sort of, that one person doing that one voice. At Hepatitis New South Wales, we've got a reconciliation action plan, and one of the key sort of tenets of that is that it's not the specified person in a role to do the work or to raise the voice of this particular issue. And I think that's the really important thing in NADA organisations and in any organisations, is that consumer voice shouldn't be from the person who's in that designated role. Everybody should try to incorporate that into their work and sort of put that at the forefront of the way they respond to things and develop policies and develop programs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think as it goes on in our space with NADA member services, that stuff will grow and funding will need to kind of grow alongside that. So yeah. And JD?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, very much reiterating, I'm sure, all the way through today's catch up together, a lot of what my colleagues in yourself are saying, which is cool. But I think flexibility is very much key here. And like Kyle was saying, it's not one voice, it's many voices. And that is kind of like, with NUAA saying, with Andy saying, how many people he's got involved in DanceWise. And that's why it's a lot of people to have, but it's about having, varied experience, because we try our very best to kind of like, there will be different settings. There'll be different events that our peers will be asked to go to, or different services. And we try to kind of like really get to know our peer workers really well and have a personal relationship with each and every one of them. They're not just a conglomerate. They're kind of like individuals that we interact with on a regular basis. Part of the reason is that's because that's our partnership program. It's because we want it to be quite intimate so that they kind of feel safe and secure to kind of like execute their role happily and safely and supportedly. But also because sometimes different services and different events might require a slightly different experience. So we try to kind of marry up and match up if we're able to. This is not always the case, but if we're able to, and we have maybe a couple of peers working in a similar area, geographical area, maybe it'll be somebody with lived experience who has been on methadone or done that sort of treatment before. So they're probably more likely somebody we send to that clinic for that engagement, or somebody who is Aboriginal background, or somebody who have lived experience of being homeless or mental health issues or so on. So we can match it up so that people really feel like they are talking to somebody that can really mirror their experience out in the field. And I think that a lot of people that we meet, you know, on the ground and out at these events have got a, if you excuse my crude terminology, but a very sensitive bullshit detector. And the whole reason that we are there is to really, we're very much, peer workers are real builders. I think we were working on building trust. We're working on building bridges. So yeah, to kind of like make sure that people are in the right place at the right time best we can.
Yeah, and what do you find the benefits are for the people that we work with? You know, when there are peer workers in the spaces, what are the benefits?
Sure, I think that a lot of people, and it doesn't just have to be our priority groups and settings. I think a lot of people too have a bit of a natural distrust of healthcare settings, particularly our priority populations. So already there is a disconnect. So it's just kind of like you're the other, especially particularly in our programs at HEP New South Wales. We're very find it very important to kind of like work in partnership with clinical partners like nurses and so on. So there can be a nurse there, and it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to talk to her in a uniform, and you know they only want something from me. But if there's that trust, if there's somebody kind of like who maybe looks a little bit different and kind of like approaches a bit differently and goes, yeah, g'day, this nurse is actually really awesome. I've seen her before. I have been through this program. I've got lived experience from being at, look, I even sometimes work at a clinic that I used to get my methadone from, and so on. So people kind of like going, oh, okay. I think people often are kind of like quite blown away when they realize you don't want something from me. Even sometimes I can go up to people and say, I'm not actually trying to sell you something, I'm trying to give you something. But it really is about making the space a bit softer, a bit easier to be in, that we're not trying to ram something into their day. A lot of people have got other things that are really pressing for them, like where am I going to sleep tonight? How am I going to eat tonight? How am I going to feel physically enough okay by getting my methadone or whatever happens to be going on for them, or just some food. So it's kind of like, cool, okay, just letting you know that I'm here and happy to talk to you, happy to take you through the corridor of healthcare towards this nurse who I can vouch for. But also, if you're not ready today, we'll be here next week, or we'll come back around, or here's a card, or like, I think it's really important that people in the community know that we're not there to pressure them or frog march them into some office. It's like, I am literally on your side, and if you want to have the time or the inclination, we can sit down and have a bit of a chat about how much kind of we share. And sometimes that can be enough for somebody on the day to be like, oh, awesome, okay, let's just check it out. And then for another person, it could be like, maybe next week, or maybe the next time. It's like, that's cool, we'll keep on turning up and keep on being here for whenever you're ready.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that very much about that meeting people where they're at on the day, on any
100%.
given day. And I think
100%.
peer workers understand that there's different priorities more than anyone.
That flexibility thing again too. You're going to read the room and read the person and give them space. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, can I just, because I mean, I think, but I think also we need to remember the historical context that we're dealing with here as well. I think JD's given a really great overview of what peer work is, but I think we need to just remember that, you know, our organisations were set up in the wake of like the HIV epidemic in the late 80s, or some of our organisations were, and you know, back then the politicians and the corridors of power understood that, you know, they weren't going to get the messages that they needed to get in the face of an existential crisis like the pandemic of HIV, which continues to this day. They weren't going to get those messages out through the nurses, through the usual health channels. And it was actually, the people on the ground that were being affected by HIV, the sex workers, the injecting drug users, the men, gay and bisexual men, who banded together to form organisations such as ours, like NUAA, HEP New South Wales, Positive Life, and SWAP, and organisations like that, to push these safety messages, harm reduction messages, to push safety around HIV, and that's where this has really all grown from. And you know, it's important to and that's the importance of the role. And I'd also go to what JD said around trust, like, you know, because there's an authenticity in peer work, and there's also like there's an authentication of peer work as well. Like there's very much like, when a peer worker steps into your service, we're promoting the acceptability of that service. Like it's not, I'm certainly not, probably too strong a word to use the word legitimizing, but we are in essence, there to help facilitate better health outcomes, behavioural change, and all the good oil around trauma-informed, strengths-based approaches to clinical or to AOD work. But it is that acceptability that we are providing as well to the service as well, and saying, hey, this is good, this is a good thing, and then walking through like what JD's talked about in terms of the logistical and the sort of the everyday running of what peer work actually is.
Yeah, nice one.
No, that's great, Andy, and I wish we had longer to go more into the history and speak more to that, because I think it's really interesting for people to kind of understand. It was actually great at the NUAA PAC forum, listening to, and I can't remember her name, so please, was it Judy? I can't remember her name. Someone who spoke at the start of the forum.
Judy Chang.
Yeah,
Judy Chang from Input. Yeah, she was great.
It was really great hearing there we go. Someone's put it in there. It was just really brilliant hearing kind of the flow of peer work and the things that have come about due to involvement from people with lived experience. Where are we? And I think something, as myself being a peer worker in another service, in the homelessness space, and working a lot with people who experience drug and alcohol use. There's only 2 peer workers in my service, and so it's very much we're kind of there, and we're giving that peer perspective, and a big part of our role is, just as much as it is working with the people that we work with, is working with our colleagues and kind of giving them that perspective. And when there's only a couple of us, they get a different view, and they learn so much from us. They really highly value the different experiences that we have and the different way we have of working, and that then filters into their work as well, which I think is such a big thing in the peer work space, when it's not a peer-led organisation, or it's not a large number of people with lived experience in the service.
And I think that goes really wider, and I think that's one of the great things that we've seen in the years doing sort of peer work is we've got a bunch of nurses that we work with who are the biggest peer champions, and that goes so much further. Where I remember that probably our biggest peer champion is a nurse practitioner that works in Sydney. And she was really, do I really need a peer worker? And when we approached, sort of thing, and sort of said, sure, okay, fine, sort of thing. Was really reluctant. It was amazing. And she called me up after it, was like, that was the best thing ever. I'm going to have peer workers at everything ever. She's the head of the AHA, the Australasian Hepatology Association. So she just, rams home peer workers to everything and anyone everywhere. And it's just it's that complete change in mindset that I think that it's almost instantaneous. People go, oh, that's what a peer worker is. That's incredible. We'll have it everywhere.
Yeah.
Nothing for us without us, Kyle.
Indeed.
And we take it from we take a leaf out of mental health, where they've been doing this work, robustly performing this peer work with the walking alongside and the valuing of the experience, lived experience, and the experiential knowledge. The valuing of that experiential knowledge that a peer worker brings. Certainly taking a leaf out of mental health there, but it's for me, even in the 5 years that I've been at NUAA, seeing the expansion and the acceptability of peer work as well amongst AOD in the AOD space as well. It's exploded, right? There's so much opportunity, and I think that's another thing to highlight. Just like we're providing these opportunities for the community to step up and provide that additional support, because who better to navigate these systems? Like, so there's some AOD systems and there's some health systems that are, they're just very difficult to navigate. And if you don't know how to do it, you'll be lost. And then to have a peer navigator, to have to have a consumer who, a consumer navigator who's been through it to walk you through it is, it oils the gears of the whole process and the programs to make it much more wonderful in so many ways. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely, Kyle, I take what you're saying, and brilliant. Yeah,
100%. Were you going to say something, JD?
I was just thinking about what you said, actually, Liz, about kind of like how you are, as a peer person yourself with a colleague, and you work in another, a larger environment of people that aren't peers necessarily, but that your voice, your opinion, your view, your expertise, your vision, that it's sought out, that it's cared about, that it's applied, that it's important. And I think that that's something that with my time in this area, office-wise in, the last 2.5 years, but before that, casually just seeing things change over the space, over the last decade, and increasingly over the last just handful of years. The way that I'm very excited and proud to say that I think most of our colleagues across the space are like, yeah, peer work, it's a bit of a no-brainer. And it's like Kyle was saying, you just need one experience to kind of go, oh, I get it. You can kind of like, even today, you can talk about it somewhat, but until you just kind of like, let's just apply it and see how it goes. And I think that does all the talking for it. But I just really love the fact that a peer worker isn't just a tack-on thing anymore. It's not just not a trophy thing, but kind of like a thing that you just go because you're supposed to have one of those because it's a good look, or that's what you do nowadays. The fact that you are heard, and that's important in your voice, and with what Andy's saying and Kyle's saying and myself, I think we are becoming increasingly important, especially just talking about the nurse practitioners that we work with. It's not that they are the experts and the peer worker comes along and they are just kind of like a lesser person. It's like both people, like the nurse has really got great expertise in what they do, and the peer worker's got great expertise in what they do. So they both can rely upon each other equally. And that's what I like nowadays. It's not that one's more important than the other. It really is a nice partnership nowadays where they can rely upon each other equally and carry that story.
Yeah, very much so.
Still some work to do there, though, JD. And I think that
always.
Sorry, I'm jumping in, but there's obviously a governance level aspect to that as well.
Always, yeah.
Where where our services set themselves up with peer workers to, from governance right all the way down to make sure that peer workers are treated the same way in the services and valued for that experience. And that's a really important, I think that's, to me, that's
the
like
standard,
the
isn't
one,
it, that we're heading towards?
It's the number one, is to ensure that, that lived experience is valued both in terms of pay, in terms of experience, in terms of time, passion, and in terms of, the actual work and that, like you're talking about a collegial working environment, and that's very much the aim. And we do see that, like, I'm not saying that we don't, but like, it's always work to be done.
I couldn't agree more, but I do think that there's a slow but sure positive incline. I'd like to optimistically say, yeah.
I think that it kind of brings us nicely into the next question. Something that I've heard mentioned is supervision, and I mean, looking at the space of the NUAA and the Hepatitis New South Wales, these organisations have been working on lived experience peer work for a long time. Thinking, I guess, what things are being done really well there, and looking to, at the moment, I'm working with some of the NADA member services to increase consumer participation. And one of the things that I really highlight, that I really stress to them, is that it's not an overnight thing, and let's do it properly. Don't make it tokenistic. Don't tick the boxes. Don't go, let's click our fingers and change everything just so we can say we've done that. And so what are the things, how can organisations provide adequate support for people in peer work or identified roles, and especially, I guess, what's happening that's good in your space. And given that, you know, due to just the newness of it in the non-government space and funding, that a lot of the time these roles will be lone positions, or that it might only be one person in an organisation or a service. So what can be taken from the work that's been done with New South Wales and NUAA in providing support?
Do you mind? I might just jump in quickly, because that's okay. But I mean, I think so. So I think, like, you know, reach out. Like in the first instance, I'd say, like, there's a possibility to reach out to NUAA or to New South Wales or you know, whatever peer-based organisation it is, and say, like, you know, like have a dialogue, where, because we've been, as you've just said, Liz, we've been doing this for a long time, and you know, we were set up by our community in the first instances, and there's been many iterations of how we approach peer work in response to the changing paradigms of the you know, of population health, in terms of hepatitis C, in terms of you know, people who use and inject drugs and things like that. But I think, you know, from the outset, you know, like, so what are the policies? You know, what are the product? You know, how are you going? What are the policies that you're going to implement that is going to support a peer worker? And then what are the structures and product? What are the structures that you can put in place that ensure, you know, that the peer work is valued above everything else? But you know, the peer work is valued, and also that it's targeted in the right way. So, you know, like having a peer worker come in and do a token, you know, I don't want to go down a negative path here, but, like, you know, having a peer worker come in for 4 hours a day and not having clearly defined a clearly defined role in which they can work within, or structure within, you know, within which the parameters of which they would work, having really clear direction on that. So that's, to me, that's governance, and that's directorship and sort of management level there as well, to ensure that that's all in place before you start to even, you know, employ peer workers. And then beyond that, you know, providing that support. So, you know, like I don't want to beat NUAA's drum too much, but I mean, you know, certainly we would look to, you know, there's a possibility there of NUAA providing support to, you know, supervise or to debrief with consumers, to debrief with peer workers in that space in the future. But then also there's you know, like, so what are you doing within the service itself? So, you know, good supervision, good debriefing, good you know, like, and good understanding of the boundaries of what you're expecting a peer worker to do, because, you know, peer workers are you know, very much a different, like it's almost different culturally around work as well, just to note. And some, you know, and you know, the expected outputs from a peer worker may not quite align with what you are expecting, or what you know, and if there's any of those disconnects, then of course communication is the key to that. But I really think, you know, from the top, to the top down to the very bottom, you know, administratively and all of that, it's about bringing peers along, and that's the other important point, is like, so you know, mention about KRC, and there are other lots of organisations around that do participation groups, like consumer participation groups, consumer reference panels, where peers are invited to onto the governance structure of an organisation, to provide that peer voice in those, you know, from every angle, and that's really important, because then you're actually starting to design the system and design your systems around peer work, rather than being sort of didactic about it and just putting it in a box.
How do we tack it on there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you're inviting that conversation, and if you're inviting the input from the from peers in those ways to consult and evaluate, review and improve, then you are, you know, you're well on the right path to you know, having a really great peer presence in the works and projects and project plans. it's in my head for some reason, projects and programs that you're running in your service.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andy. There's heaps of great things in there. Kyle, do you have anything that you want to jump in with?
Oh, look, Andy's hit so many nails on so many heads there, with so many things that I would say the same. I think that you know, and this is not in a way to sort of drum up, you know, work for Hepatitis New South Wales or NUAA, but I think one of the key things, and I mentioned it before about sort of isolation, I think it's such, NUAA and Hep New South Wales have, you know, we've got 25 peer workers, you know, NUAA has got at least that, if not, you know, double, you know, massive numbers of people, you know, with both lived experience. Yeah, and so it's like huge numbers of sort of people, and being part of that group, I think, is really important for debriefing, feeling like you're part of a wider whole. I think isolated roles within organisations are really difficult. One of the examples that I think I trot out a lot is NUAA employee, a peer worker out in Nepean, Jades. It's Nepean, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a really great model of somebody who's part of a wider whole, part of a supportive organisation like NUAA that to sort of back them up, but is working in part of a service. And so it's kind of like JD sort of talked about having sort of the foot in two camps there. And I think that really, you know, helps to sort of bridge a lot of those two things. But yeah, I think that's one of the things from a Hep New South Wales perspective is being part of a wider whole, being part of a wider team, you know, really is just such a supportive atmosphere for people to be able to say, I'm having these issues, here's another 25 other peer workers that I can sort of say, oh, you know, I'm struggling with this in this service, or I had these, you know, I'm having this client at the moment, you know, that we're having no interaction with. Anybody got any good tips for how, you know, to engage better, or, you know, the organization is blocking me here, or, you know, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with that. Just being, having a whole sort of supportive network behind that, I think is really important. And yeah, one of the things that I think we're really proud of, you know, with our peer work at Hep New South Wales, is that lots of our peer workers then go on to roles within organisations sometimes. So I think we've got 2 of the people in our team over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, have gone on to full or part-time work within NSPs, and another one, third one, in youth work. So it really is providing that sort of stepping stone. We're not possessive over our peer workers. It's not, we want them to be peer workers forever. You know, if that stepping stone onto full-time work is brilliant, because now we've got somebody who has lived experience working in that service. You know, what a better situation than that.
Yeah, brilliant. And just before I forget, JD, I'll get to you in a moment.
Sure.
Just thinking of the community. So NADA has a community of practice for consumer representatives, lived experience workers of NADA member services. So if there's any member services watching, I do run a community of practice, which is just a nice space for people to come together and, like has been said, have conversations with other people in similar roles and the things that come up, and learning about what's happening in the space, and kind of getting support around the things that you may not be getting such great support about out of the space where people get it.
Or even things there, Liz, even things that you actually feel that you can't raise in that service.
Yes.
You know, like the really, so some of the nitty gritty stuff, and all of that you know, that can really pull a peer worker tension wise in many different directions. I know you're going to switch to JD in a moment, and I want JD to mention training as well, because I feel like I've meant to say this all along, and I keep saying talk about excellent. Talk about training as well. Yeah, that's really mate. Important.
I've got, see, this is a great thing. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Liz and Nada, to get Angie, Kyle, and myself together, because I always come away from the opportunity like this pretty buzzed, actually, because we kind of like, the more we talk, and with you too, Liz, and other questions that we'll answer later, it's a great opportunity to kind of bounce off each other the great things that we do. And if one of us kind of like feels like they've missed something, that next person gets it, and then you can build, like these conversations feel like you really kind of get to build on what we do, and how lucky we are to be involved in this space. And I will take that opportunity, Andy, that to support what everyone's saying, that I think it is a lot about, it's about being a kind of like a holistic approach, and it's very much about support and connection and communication, and that's very much training. So to have that on a regular basis, to know that people, and to be honest with you, I think you'll probably get this too, Andy, I know that Kyle and I do, that so many of our peer workers are like, what? We're getting free training? Like, they get blown away. And on occasion, you know, when there's a payment involved too, or
we pay our peers, yeah, we pay
exactly.
our peers in training.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're like, hold on a minute. And I remember this from years ago when I first started, like over a decade ago. I actually was talking to a peer this morning that was just kind of like, oh, you've invited me to do, I see that there's a talk coming up next week with Greg Dorr that we invited people to kind of like get them stimulated, especially because obviously with COVID, we haven't been able to get out into the community, which has been insane and quite frustrating. But, and she was kind of like, are you sure you want me to come along? Because like, I can't believe that I'm getting free training and that you're going to pay me. And she also said, I'm working in an NSP now down in Wollongong, and it was because of the work for you doing peer work that I ended up getting the job in the NSP. So if you don't mind me kind of like being a bit corny for a moment, I said, she actually just sort of set off her own bat, Peter, the lovely woman, said, the program opens up so many opportunities. And I just sort of thought that was something to celebrate, because it said, hey, I'm about to do a webinar at 12 o'clock. Can I quote you? And she's like, yeah, totally. And so that's part of what we do, I think, is because we make sure that we treat everybody as an individual, because we are, but make sure that they have got access to a lot of support. We can, sometimes I feel like a little bit of a creep, because I'm like, hi, it's your pre-brief time. And they're like, yes, you sent me the email. I know where I'm going. It's like, but yes, have you got the phone number of somebody when you get there? Like, I don't want you to get lost. And it's like, yes, mum. And then so they know exactly where they're going. There might be an issue here or there. So they know what they're walking into, so they can feel safe and robust about how they're about to spend their day or their afternoon. And also that important debrief too, which is kind of like, how was the work? Anything freaky happen? Something awesome happen? Just so we can understand what's going on in the service too, to help support them again in the future. And also just setting up situations that they can often give feedback, make sure that they feel really safe, that they can be as honest as they like this works, this could be better. Different opportunities, I think too, that we make sure that the online get-togethers, especially over this COVID time, I think it's been really important to reach out to people that have just sort of been having a bit of a challenge actually, but regularly getting together, and those very important pre-briefs, debriefs, and that once again that it's not the same thing that each and every person needs as a group. I mean, luckily that we've got this cool gang of people to hang out with, but some people aren't, their computer literacy might be different. So instead of kind of like, I don't read my emails every week or every day, so it's like, cool, we'll text message you, or I'm better on a phone call. Just making sure that everybody gets the kind of, we deal with them as a group, but also as individuals as well within that group. So that's sort of,
yeah. I might, thank you so much, JD. I might just jump into the question and answers if that's okay. I think we maybe answered some of the stuff. Sorry, Andy, to just
no, that's okay.
So first question, any advice you can give on how to start consumer engagement in a service? And floor's open for anyone to jump in.
Great question. Kyle, I reckon that you know, when
I was going to say
started
Kyle as well.
Yeah, because I mean, like we've always had a peer program going on in some, but I mean, you've kind of like exponentially over the last handful of years, we've kind of like gone from a handful of people to a huge amount, and I know that that's been important for you to grow. How'd you do that?
Look, I think, you know, I mean, I think we were, you know, Andy and myself and you know, certainly JD as well have sort of, you know, been there at the times when, you know, you were really having to fight for the case for peer work. And I think that case is much easier to make nowadays. I think we're starting to get sort of, you know, certainly there's, you know, research and papers if you want to go down that sort of dull and boring, but, you know, effective route. But, you know, we've got the New South Wales Ministry of Health are incredibly supportive of peer work, you know, and that's that pressure, you know, that can come from the top. LHDs have all got targets. We've got a strategy, you know, Hep C strategy coming out very shortly that very much, you know, front and center puts in it. Peer work is an essential part of this. You know, there is support everywhere, you know, clinical level, LHD level, research level. So I think sort of pulling all of those things together, you know, makes it easy to make a case, but pick up the phone. The three of us here will support any service. NADA does a fantastic job as well. There's so many sort of services out there who are all sort of fighting for this case. Yeah, we'll all jump on board.
Definitely. And I sorry, Andy?
No, please go. I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, so NADA has on our website, we have a consumer participation audit tool, where you can go through and do it. And I'm working with a few services on it at the moment, go through and do an audit of your business and look at where you are at in terms of consumer participation, and then look at, well, put in an action plan together and where can we go from there. And so starting at that baseline of, well, where are we at right now? And like I said earlier, not jump in right into let's change everything overnight, but okay, where are we at and what are the steps? You know, what are the things that we need to learn? What are the frameworks and the guidelines that we need to put into place so that we can best support this happening in a way that's safe for the people that we get involved in this? Because like JD said, like just the simple things like pre-brief and debrief are so important for some of the people that we work with and who work with us in terms of, I think particularly when we're asking them to come in and play a role in our services, that it's so important that they get the right support and that support looks different to, you know, someone in a case management position.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, no, that's a really great point, Liz. And I think, because I think what you really like, what you're touching on and what the foundational aspect of what you've just mentioned then is evaluation. So, you know, like, so it's about being able to have an honest conversation with your service and the people in your service, and bringing in a consumer participation aspect to that. Consult your consumers, consult your clients and your patients, and you know, really work at, you know, like it could be simple, like how peer friendly, like how friendly is your service really, like and I don't mean like, you know, smiles on everyone's faces, like, but is there, you know, is your waiting room welcoming? Is your, you know, is there information on there that, you know, have you got the resources and information available for people to pick up about, you know, the things that we've spoken about, everything from homelessness to managing your phone finances to gambling, to AOD, to different treatment products and programs. And so like having that really honest conversation, both within the organization, within your organization, and then, you know, actually bringing your consumers, you know, getting your clients involved in evaluating, you know, so what, you know, you know, doing a survey, reviewing what you're doing, and, you know, really putting the question, you know, the big why, you know, like, so, you know, why are we doing what we do? And we, you know, obviously we're doing it out of passion, we're doing it out of commitment and a love for the, you know, a love for the work that we do in terms of providing better options. I suppose that's not the word the phrase I want to use, but, you know, better options for consumers. And if that's the case, then, you know, then having that honest conversation around evaluation, and that is intrinsic. And then from there, you can start to work through what your plan might be. You know, do you need a peer worker who's going to be at the front? You know, you know, if it's say it's like an opiate treatment program, clinic, or that the peer worker is going to be at the front, or if it's within some sort of a resi rehab or detox, or that other paradigm of AOD. You know, is it somebody coming along as a volunteer, not a volunteer, as a peer facilitator to group work and to provide, you know, that non-clinical expertise. Around group work and things like that. That's where I'd start, and then, you know, your governance. So what are your policies? What's your policy suite going to look like, and how are you going to change that to support, you know, to really embed peer work. Peer work is trust, empathy, and support. Those are the, you know, like those are the three things. And how are you going to do those three things? Like, how are you going to build trust within your organization or your work? How are you going to, you know, how a peer work is going to provide that empathic experiential gathering and sharing, and then how are you going to support that work as well? So, and how a peer work is going to support your consumers walking through the door each day, or walking through your programs.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Andy. And I'm just conscious we've only got 10 minutes left. There's a couple of questions here. I feel like the next one it's been answered a little bit. So there's still work to do around advocating for more funding, especially for consumer and peer work roles. One, what do you think services can do better in regard to advocating for funding for designated peer role, which we've heard already that the ministry is on board with that type of thing. And I feel in the meantime, what can we do if we can't have a designated role as yet? Can anyone answer that in 1 minute?
I can answer that in seconds. The first one regarding funding is that peer workers are a hell of a lot cheaper than it might be a nurse or somebody at a CEO level and can do double the effectiveness. So I think from a cost benefit analysis, peer work is one of the most cost effective things in this sector. So I think there's an easy case to make. From finding a little bit of money can make a big difference. Starting small, and that's what we've sort of seen in services is go, they might have a peer worker come in once a month, and they go, actually, let's get them in once a fortnight, let's get them in once a week, and sort of build on that. So getting them in the door with a small amount to start with is great. And the other side of the coin is that both Hepatitis New South Wales and NUAA are funded to provide peer workers in services and at services around the place. And so, we can get those peer workers in the door to start with, and hopefully that makes some sort of changes and makes the case, and then it could be about finding some money off the back of that.
Brilliant, thank you.
We've had people, we've just even recently, COVID clinics with a peer supported role for testing and vaccination at NSP outlets and things like that. Providing a peer for those sorts of highly movable and the challenging situations around COVID as well. Even just doing things like that is really important. But I just go back to the value, bring your peers in, the peers coming in through the door, bring them in through the side as well, and bring them to the table, and just and start to involve them more actively in the decision-making processes of the of the programs you're building and running.
And that can very much be done right there on the front line without setting up committees. It's just feedback in, whether it's residential or outreach services or whatever it is, just in feedback that you're getting. That's consumer participation, getting that feedback. How is this program? Is this meeting your needs? And really evaluating things with that feedback, as important, potentially more important than staff feedback. I will just, I think that's a great question. I'm going to very quickly ask someone to answer it super quick, and then we'll jump into the last question. Definitely an hour is not enough time for this. So personality, integrity, and knowledge, 3 things I have so much of, but never had the training or the discipline to hone my skills. Thanks to Andy and NUAA gave me up. So through training and patience have made me a better peer for our communities. However, I sometimes need to know when to shut up. Any advice? I'm going to put my hand up to say, I talk a lot too. This is what we do, I think. But does anyone have any advice on that? Very quickly.
I think it's been led on already. I think that's to do with training. I think that's to do with communication. To know that if this person obviously has something on their mind, they can reach out, and to know that they are very much supported and encouraged to keep in touch. We're telling our peer workers, as I'm sure Andy is too. It's just like, got any questions, got any insecurities, anything, just reach out, give us a conversation, and I'm happy to have that conversation anytime. I think that we touch on it regularly, maybe with boundaries too, just kind of like sometimes a boundary isn't kind of like a stopper of things. It can be a structure with one you can lean against, so if you're kind of like not quite sure, we can help you with boundaries, but maybe structure a little bit. And I think that you have nailed it a wee bit though, Liz, in the regards that I think the average peer worker is an incredibly passionate person. You're not in the space particularly for the money, I don't think. You're there because you actually really care. I think that is the one most important. There's a few threads through every peer worker, but I reckon that's probably one of the most reliable ones, that they really care, they're passionate, they've come from a lived experience background, and they know what it's like. So when you get the opportunity to share that with someone, it can be difficult to kind of keep it in line. But I think that if you kind of just remind yourself that you're not there for yourself so much as you're there for the consumer. And sometimes that means to kind of like be a really chatty person, and sometimes it means that some people, if you're reading the room, it means a softly approach can actually be more effective than not.
Yes, and something really important that I've learned, and then I'll just jump into the last question, is the value of purposeful and sustainable storytelling. Is this purposeful for the person I am working with and holding space for? And is this safe for me to be sharing? Am I okay with it being out there? And is it safe for the person who's hearing it to be hearing? You know, so yeah.
The power of the personal story, right? So yeah, you're right, Liz.
Yeah. I'll jump into the last question, and I hope to have 2 minutes each for it. We're going to have 1 minute each. Take away, and I mean, so much has been said already, but in 1 minute, what do you want to impart to the people watching the webinar? Kyle.
I'll jump in. Peer work is tough. Peer work is really tough. And I think it's really important that it is recognized that it is incredibly demanding. It's physically demanding, standing up and engaging with people for 3-4 hours. It's emotionally, exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. It's really, really tough work. And JD sort of nailed it there. Peer workers do it because they're passionate, and that's the real underlying thing. They care about the work that they do. And I just really think that it's important that that's recognized. Andy hit the nail on the head earlier when he was talking about pay, and JD saying earlier about expertise. Those two things are really essential. Peer work should be paid for expertise, and that's why both organizations pay peer workers and recognize that, and are really passionate about pushing payment for expertise. It's not free expertise, it's not free information. It's really important we pay that because it's expertise, but also because it's really, really tough.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Kyle. And JD?
G'day. All right. So things that I would like people to know is that, like I mentioned before, I'd like to reiterate that your peer worker is a human person that are genuinely quite brave. And as Kyle said, you do have to have a bit of step-upness. It's not a passive role. You do have to be a bit brave sometimes to put yourself in positions that you never thought you see yourself in. But the passion is the thread. We are trust builders. That's huge to build trust, I think. And we're bridge builders, passionate, caring, flexible people. And I'd also just like to reach out to there's some questions there and a bit of interest, which I love. And I feel pretty confident that Andy and Kyle wouldn't mind me saying that after this, you know where we work. I'm sure you can find out where we are. If there's anybody that wants to continue any conversation about support, ideas, follow-up, I know that Andy, Kyle, and myself would be really open to anybody to continue any of these conversations outside of this meeting, because that's what we do and that's what we care about.
Awesome, thank you, JD. And Andy, you've got 1 minute.
So I think, I just highlight most of what I've said there, and bringing people to the table. But the other thing about peer work is time. I don't think there should be expectations on peer workers to develop things. These things don't happen quickly. I think about the 2 and 3 years that I've spent talking to particular peers about their Hep C, for instance, and that trying to motivate towards behavioural change, even just to get a test, has taken time. And so within that concept of time is also what JD's been talking about building trust, and trust and developing that empathy bridge through to trust as well. So the time is really important. So and it's not something that happens quickly. Peer work is, but for instance, very quickly, we had Tony at Rankin Court for a number of years, and he worked very hard over quite a few years there to change what was happening in that front room there around people feeling supported, feeling feeling kindness and feeling well looked after. And it was he was just there. He just sat there and he was available, and that's time, right? So that's my one that I'd take away.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy. And I've said it a few times already, but I wish we had more time. We don't, though. So thank you all, the panelists. You have all been amazing. It's been a brilliant conversation. And like JD mentioned, please reach out to any of the panelists, reach out to myself. We will, in the coming days, be sending links to some of the websites and contact information out to people who have registered for this webinar. So keep your eye out for them. If you're watching this later, feel free to get in touch with NUAA, NUAA, New South Wales to get more details and more information. Is there anything else that I need to say? There's lots of resources available on the NADA website. Also, like I said, the audit tool and a community of practice for NADA member services, but also the NUAA and New South Wales websites, I'm sure will have a lot of information as well, and just picking up the phone and having those conversations with people, because I feel that's where the real stuff happens, in the conversations and in the discussions. So thank you all so much. I'm going to stop talking. Very much appreciate it. It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for hosting us, Liz. Bye.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Andy, Kyle, thank you.
Bye.